Well, our first topic today, according to the latest foreign trade statistics report from the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's non-oil exports have fallen by 39%. From 6.914 trillion naira to 4.194 trillion naira in 10 years. The data shows that 4.194 trillion naira non-oil exports recorded in 2021 is 39.34% lower than the 6.914 trillion naira non-oil exports recorded in 2012. In 2021, the nation's total exports were estimated at 19.057 trillion naira, with non-oil segment occupying 4.194 trillion naira of non-oil exports, comprising 22.07% of the total export last year. Now, however, the race to the $200 billion in the FX repatriation RT200 FX program by the Central Bank of Nigeria, the organized private sector is hopeful that Nigeria's trade deficit may be reduced and foreign reserves may improve. Well, let's talk about this very quickly as I have joining me via Zoom to discuss this. He is a partner, tax reporting and strategy at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Kenneth Erikome. Good afternoon. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this.
Good afternoon, Tolu, and happy to join you via Zoom. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, of course. Well, I looked at these figures, 39% decline from 6.914 trillion naira to about 4.194 trillion naira. Well, it's in 10 years if you look at this. But first, what do you think could be responsible for this? I know a lot of issues have been identified, but in your thoughts, I'd like your perspective to this.
Thank you very much, Tolu. And I know you've already read out the statistics or presented the statistics for our viewers to appreciate the decline. But just to re-emphasize what it really means. So in 2012, our non-oil exports was about 6.9 trillion. But in 2021, it's about 4.9 trillion. That's about a 40% drop in our non-oil exports. But in addition to that, in relative terms, when you look at the non-oil exports percentage of total exports, in 2012, it was about 30.8%. But in 2021, it's about 22%. So in relative terms, compared to total exports, non-oil exports have also declined. And if you then go a step further to even look at the currency and convert it to dollars, the decline is even more massive. Because in 2012, the exchange rate was about 160 naira per dollar. But today it's about, it's about double of that, or even if not more than double of that, which means that in dollar terms, the decline would even be much more than 39%. And several things, in my opinion, have driven this. The first one, obviously, which is sort of like the pulse from the exporters, is that they are only able to convert their dollars into naira using the official window. But they also realize that in reality, from a practical perspective, they could get more for their dollars. When you analyze the exporters, you discover that a lot of them are exporters of commodities. That's where our strength lies. So, export of sesame seed, export of cashew nuts, maybe a bit of urea and aluminum alloy. So a lot of them, when they export their proceeds, they are not using it to import new raw materials. They essentially need to sort for additional raw materials by paying the farmers, or expand their business, which means that they'll be looking for Naira conversion. But when they are only able to convert what they get, at 419, but the parallel market rate is way more. That is a disincentive for them to repatriate, their proceeds through the NXT window and source for local currency at a very low rate. So I think from a policy perspective, I think it's right that they need to repatriate their proceeds as exporters in line with the CBN regulations. But we now need to look a bit more at some more incentive to induce them to bring it through this window. And one of the things we need to look at is the rate at which they exchange, considering that they may feel like they're not going to get sufficient Naira conversion for their dollars based on the demand in the market. So that's obviously one of the things that has impacted us. The other one is a structural issue, which I'm sure everyone is aware. We've flogged some of these issues several times, but it's good for us to address them again. When you're playing in the international market, you have to be competitive. Competitive means that in the global market, you're coming with products that have to compete in terms of quality and compete in terms of pricing. Now, if your items are not of high quality, then they will be second further in the chain. And then if your pricing is not right, you're coming up with high price for similar quality of product, then it would mean that off-takers will be taken from the places where they're able to source for these things cheaper. And those structural issues from a Nigerian perspective makes it difficult for us to compete when it comes to value addition and manufacturing. The number one is the port system and the bottlenecks around logistics. The second one is transportation cost, with the rising price of diesel, the rising price of gas, transportation of items, even, intrastate becomes a bit more expensive. Electricity is also a massive issue. In many other jurisdictions where other exporters will be coming from, they are able to source for electricity, consistent and uninterrupted electricity, while manufacturers here have to grapple with substituting and subsidizing their power through alternative means. So those structural issues makes it difficult for our players to compete. And of course, the last one, which is a strategic focus on what our strengths are vis-a-vis what we would like the country to be in the near future. And I think from that perspective, we haven't done sufficiently, but I think the government is doing a bit, to tackle that. We need to do more in terms of saying, where is our competitive edge, where is our competitive advantage, and focus a bit more on those things so that we're able to source for Forex and ease some of the FX liquidity issues which we're experiencing.
Well, brilliant submission there, all encompassing. I must say, Kenneth, great stuff from you. But I want to ask, staying with Nigeria, all of the efforts being put together to improve exports. We see a lot of moves, export expansion funds, a lot of specialties, kind of just to promote exports. Yes, I agree with you that we are not adding value and all of that, but what do you think all of this is also paying off one way or the other?
Okay, so you're touching on some of the fiscal policies that government has put in place to incentivize exports.
Yes.
Let me tell you that there are a lot, actually. So we have the Export Expansion Grant, where a manufacturing exporter can get a rebate of up to 15% cash back from the government. We have the corporate income tax exemption on people that manufacture and export, as long as they repatriate their proceeds and reinvest. We also have a few others which are regional benefits. For example, the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme, which is operational to a large extent, where you can move goods within the ECOWAS region free of duty in the country where the goods are being exported to. So all of these things are there, to support exporters. But like you would have noticed from my submission, a lot of them are actually focused, number one, on companies, number two, on manufacturing exporters. Now, if you are not doing enough, or if we're not doing enough to improve infrastructure, these incentives will be eroded by the value. The value from some of these incentives will be eroded by the cost of production that comes from the lack of infrastructure. So that's the first issue. The second issue is that from a for example, the EEG issue, the Export Expansion Grant, the government has had some backlogs in the past that has accumulated over time. And therefore, it becomes a theoretical issue. Theoretically, the benefit is there, but practically, there seems to be a challenge in actually getting the Export Expansion Grant. So we have exporters who have, invariably qualified for some of these things, but because of some bottlenecks and bureaucracy, they've not been able to access their credit, and therefore they are not able to utilize it. So we also have this challenge, and one of the conversations and discussions happening at the government level is to see how some of those backlogs are dealt with. And then the new EEG scheme allows players to be able to, get the certificate, and it is marketable, which means that they can sell it off to another person who requires it. And it can be used for more items, not just duty. It can be used to pay AMCON debt. It can be used to pay off some other taxes. So those are some of the innovation from the Nigerian Export Promotion Commission that have, that comes up with the new EEG scheme. We're hoping that in the near future, some of the gains from that will begin to come up. But there are some other fiscal policies that may not be encouraging or promoting exports. And some of them, for example, in other countries, you have duty drawback, you have what we call manufacturer's inbound scheme. What that effectively means is that when a manufacturer imports raw materials, but uses those and pays import duty, but uses those raw materials to produce an item or goods that are exported, they're able to get back the import duties that they incur on those imported raw materials. Now, we used to have those schemes operational in the past, but many of them have become defunct. But when you're competing with other countries that have these fiscal policies still in place, it means that exporters located in those jurisdictions are able to get some competitive advantage based on their environment. And just some other things which, from a fiscal policy perspective could also be important is that there have been some recent changes brought about by the VAT modification order 2021, which effectively may increase the cost of logistics for manufacturers and exporters. One of them is the introduction of VAT on gas. So, gas, previously was not VATable, but in the VAT modification order, it now says that, unless the gas is being used for public production by a GENCO, then there'll be VAT on the gas. as well as VAT on export of gas. So export of gas previously was zero rated. Now it's exempt, which means that a manufacturer of gas now sits with the VAT cost on feed gas that they purchase. And of course, an additional one is introduction of VAT on diesel, which, even though practically this has not been implemented, but it's a cause of worry for players in the industry. So there are some fiscal policies which also needs to align with some of the objectives which government is looking at. And I know government has done quite a lot in incentivizing exports, but these policies have to be aligned to ensure that the outcome is consistent with the strategy of government.
Let's wrap up on this though, because we're taking it so perfect, and it's so interesting that time is already fast spent. But I'd like you to comment on the issue of standardizing our products to meet standards, of course, and also government having a ready market for farmers and all of that. Do you think this can also encourage or improve exports?
Absolutely. This is one area, so some of the areas, so this is non-oil export focused, but I'll touch on some other things which are not non-oil. But one of the things we really need to look at is how, over time, we've lost our place in terms of cocoa export and lost our place to a neighboring countries such as Ivory Coast. And how, initially we were a big player in palm oil. Palm oil is, one of the constituent materials. So it is said statistically, if you walk into a supermarket, that 50% of the items which you find in the supermarket would have a base with palm oil. But we've lost that competitive advantage to the likes of Indonesia and some other countries in the East. Now, we need to go back and look at some of our policies around, cocoa, palm oil, and you rightly mentioned it, standardization of our products so that they are at the level of international standards, because that's the only way we can compete. But if Ivory Coast can do it, if Indonesia can do it, considering that, the arable land which we have in Nigeria compares favorably with some of these other jurisdictions, then I think we can get back our advantage by ensuring that the exports that comes out of Nigeria meet those standards. And some of the regulators and some of the policymakers have a role to play in this regard. So the Standards Organization of Nigeria, the NEPC, and other regulators. And the focus should actually be on encouragement, promoting, and assisting, as against denying applications for export. Now, if we're able to do that and focus on it, because I think historically we focused a lot on crude oil, and in more recent times we've also been focusing on natural gas, we still need to go back to where we have competitive advantage and ensure that the standards on these products meet international standards. So that is with regards to non-oil exports. But non-oil exports are not the only focus of government or the only place where we have a competitive advantage. Another area where we have a competitive advantage is with regards to services. So in Nigeria, we have a high unemployment rate. We also have a high educational workforce, and we speak English. And because of our exchange rate, the cost of labor has been dropping relative to other jurisdictions. Now, in many other countries where you have these qualities, there is a conscious focus on exporting services, either through outsourcing or our banking, which we have tried to do largely with the support of the central bank, which has been productive. But looking at outsourcing, even call centers and things like that, it's possible for Nigeria to play in that space and provide support services to countries, because our base language is English, and those countries are looking for where they would get some of these support. But for us to do that, we need to sort out electricity, internet, and power. So those should also be part of the focus of government. The final thing I think we need to look at, considering that crude oil is underperforming, is gas. With our significant reserves which we have on gas, we also need to look at policies to encourage, more projects similar to what the Nigeria Nigeria LNG has done with the several trains which they've constructed, which provides significant foreign exchange for the country. So, I think the opportunities are there. It just has to do with more strategic focus and the regulators being enablers to enable the private sector to thrive with regards to export, export of goods, export of services, and play to our competitive advantage, because we can't play in every space.
Mr. Kenneth Erikume, I must thank you. We're going to reschedule our other topic of discourse because today this has been so interesting and time is well spent. Thank you for joining us, partner Tax Reporting and Strategy, PwC, and do enjoy your Easter break.
Thank you.